Hey, so my name's Vikas. I'm a FA commercial pilot, multi-engine and single-engine instrument rated as well. Today we'll be learning about radial interceptions, DME arcs, holes, and LS approaches. The whole the whole purpose of today's class is to learn how to go from en route or the arrival phase into the approach phase so that you can go and land the aircraft. Uh, these are procedures and these are the things you'll fly in an aircraft to come to a position from where you can safely land the aircraft. That's why these are very important. But before we learn these, there are a few prerequisites to today's class. The prerequisites will be pretty easy. It's basically you should know how the ground aids work, VORs, NDB, and the ADFs, ILS, um, and how these look on your instruments as well as your GPS. Because DME arcs can be substituted with either by DME, distance measuring equipment, or by GPS, which gives the distance from a certain fix for the same procedures, and DME, of course. Um, that's the first prerequisite. The second prerequisite is to have an idea of how the instruments look. You should know how the CDI, the HSI looks, and how you tune them, and how you set the proper courses and intercept the proper courses. We'll be talking about radial interceptions first. That's the whole idea behind the entire procedures here. That's the second prerequisite. And the final prerequisite would be to know how to implement these into your day-to-day flying. I will explain in the end of this video a practical application by looking at certain approaches that are published by FAA and by ICAO for some certain airports in Florida, USA. Okay, so let's start off. I'll share my iPad screen and let's start off. Okay, give it a second. Yep. Yeah, you should be able to see my screen now. And today we'll be doing radial interception, DMA arcs, holes, and ILS approaches as we told. Uh, let's start off with the first thing. You should, as I told you in your prerequisites, you should already know how the instruments look and how you can interpret what the instruments are telling you. Okay. And first, let's talk about radial interceptions, right? Now, as I told you, as a prerequisite, you should know what a radial is. It is basically, just to give a brief overview, if you have any sort of navigational aid, a VOR, a TACAN, or NDB, okay? Mostly a VOR or a TACAN. NDBs are kind of phased out and they don't have radials. They just have a direction from which a particular frequency is coming out, and that can be found out. Radials are mostly for VORs, okay? So radials are just basically lines of different frequencies coming out of the VOR. These can be amplitude modulated or frequency modulated depending on your navigational aid. Right. So now you can see for one single navigation aid, there are multiple radials. You can tune the radial in your instrument and intercept it. So let's take a very simple example so that we can proceed with radial interceptions first. Let's say there is a VOR named Fly, Foxtrot Lima Yankee, and you're somewhere towards the south. You're flying a heading of, let's say, 300 degrees, right? Let's say you're somewhere southeast. Right? I said we were flying a heading of 300 degrees. So our nose is pointed at the 300 degrees. And ATC gives a certain instruction like Let's name the aircraft. I'm gonna take a US registration. It can be anything else as well. November 373 Charlie Alpha. It's one of the trainer aircrafts actually. So the aircraft, the ATC tells you instruction like this. November 373 Charlie Alpha, intercept and fly radial 090 Foxtrot Lima Yankee VOR inbound. So what they're meaning to say is wherever you are, intercept and track 090 radial of the Foxtrot Lima Yankee VOR. So as you can see, 090 radial is the radial extending outbound from Foxtrot Lima Yankee towards 090. Do not be confused between 090 radial and 090 course. Okay, track and radials are very different. This is a prerequisite, as I told you. Okay, so your basic objective here is to bring your aircraft, intercept the radial, and go towards the VOR. This is your objective. Now, how do you do this and how does it look? Okay, there are different procedures, but a rule of thumb, it's pretty easy for radial interceptions. If you are greater than 10 nautical miles from the VOR, how do you know this? You either have a DME or use your GPS, right? If you're greater than 10 nautical miles, you will be doing a 90 degrees intercept. Okay. And if you are lesser than 10 nautical miles, your intercept will be 45 degrees. Now, what does this 90-degree intercept and 45-degree intercept actually mean? It just means it's very simple, and a lot of students do get confused with this. So it just means if this is your 090 radial from the fly VOR, Foxtrot Lima Yankee, right? For a 90-degree intercept, when you're coming closer to that radial, obviously it's not a physical radial, it's imaginary or a frequency that is being sent out from the VOR, which you can see on an instrument. So when you're coming towards the radial, your nose of the aircraft is at 90 degrees to the angle. It's not 090. It's the angle between the nose of your aircraft and the radial is 90. This is your 90-degree intercept. Okay, and similarly, when I say a 45-degree intercept, the nose of the aircraft is at a 45-degree angle to the radial you're intercepting. That'll be your 45-degree intercept. Okay, it has nothing to do with the direction the nose of the aircraft is pointing. It's just what angle it is making with that radial when you're intercepting that radial, right? Okay, that's what radial intercepts mean. Now, coming back to our initial problem. So you're flying a heading of 300, you're asked to intercept a radial of 090 degrees. Let's say you are approximately 7 nautical miles from the VOR. So as I told you, we are less than 10 nautical miles, we'll be making a 45-degree intercept. So what heading will you intercept the 090 radial, right? Obviously, now is the time when we talk about course and heading. If you turn to a heading of 090, basically your aircraft is turning this way, which is wrong. They want you to go towards the VOR and not away from it, right? And so you're supposed to turn this way, correct? So your 300, your 090 radial, assuming zero wind conditions, obviously, for this problem, you're supposed to make a 45-degree intercept. Now, If I extend this radial, the opposite side, this will be 270 degrees, right? Now, the angle between the heading and the radial will be 300 minus 270, which is 30 degrees, right? Now, we need a 45-degree intercept. So 270 plus 45, 270 plus 45 will be 315 degrees. So your correct procedure when the ATC gives the following instruction, your instruction is November 373 Charlie Alpha, intercept and track 090-degree radial, Foxtrot Lima Yankee VOR, inbound. This is your instruction from ATC. So what your correct course of action will be, turn to a heading of 315 degrees. Okay, continue flying until the needle is almost centered. Then turn to a heading of 270 degrees. Now, why is it 270 and why is it not 090? Because we're going towards the VOR. Every time it's a to indication or towards the VOR, your course will be opposite to that of the radial. Every time it's a from or away from the VOR or with a from indication, then your radial and the course you'll be flying will be the same. Okay. So how does this look on your instrument? Right. So if you have tuned everything correctly, I'm going to consider a HSI, okay, just to make our work simple today. Right. You should have tuned your HSI to a course of 270 degrees with a to indication. That indicates you're closer to the 090 radial, okay? And you are to the south, right? And you're towards the south. So the deflection should be somewhere like this. Right. And on your heading indicator, you will be showing 300. Now, as I told you, the procedure, first, you turn, you make a right turn towards the heading of 315. So you keep turning until your heading indicator shows 315 degrees, okay? And you keep continuing inbound, 315, you keep going 315 degrees until this needle starts coming inward, okay? When it's almost inward, you move with the needle and you turn to a heading of 270 degrees, okay? And you center needle, you center the needle and you're 270 degrees. That's your radial interception. Now, the same problem, what if it was outbound? It's the same thing, but the course you'll be tuning will be the same as the radial. And let's consider the same one. The ATC told you to track outbound for this same thing. Number 373 Charlie Alpha, intercept and track 090 radial, fly VOR, outbound. Right. Now, you're still with 300 head on your heading, and you're supposed to track it outbound. So your course and your radial has to be the same with the from indication, correct? So you'll turn to a heading of 090, right? 090 minus 45 degrees, not plus now, it's minus. So you'll turn to a heading of 045 degrees, okay? And you should have set the proper course, right? And you'll continue flying until the needle is almost centered. That's your basic intercepting and tracking. Then turn to a heading of 090 degrees, okay? And in this case, you should have set your indicate course to 090 degrees. You're still on the heading of, you started with a heading of 300 anyways. Right. You keep going towards the needle. The needle slowly starts getting centered. Okay. You should have turned towards the heading of 045 degrees. Okay. Once it's centered, then you turn to a heading of 090 degrees. Okay. So, and you just intercept the radial and track outbound. It may seem very confusing and daunting at this stage, but the basic idea, if I can draw the figure and show you, in the first case, if it was inbound, you're just going at 45 degrees to the radial and then going inbound. This is your first case. And for the second case, okay, you're here, right? You have to go outbound. So you make a 45-degree intercept and you turn outbound and you go outbound. That's it. All of this is just to show you how these look on the instruments. That's your basic intercepting and tracking. So we follow this procedure. If we are less than 10 nautical miles, we make a 45-degree intercept. If they're more than 10 nautical miles, you usually make a 90-degree intercept. This is a rule of thumb. It doesn't have to be, it's not standard. In your exams, in your DGC exams, you might get questions where the intercept may be with a different angle or a different total direction itself. But the basic concept is still the same. There's a radial, you maneuver the aircraft in such a way that you intercept the radial and go inbound or outbound, okay? And it doesn't have to be, you have to stay on the radial once you have intercepted. In the next portion, when we talk about DME arcs, what we'll be doing is we'll be intercepting multiple radials one by one to make a proper arc, okay? That's the first portion of the entire class for today, radial interceptions. Oh, I forgot to add one more thing. That'll be, give me a second. That will be course reversals. This is, when we talk about course reversals, we'll talk about holes and approaches as well. Okay, this was the first part, radial interceptions. And the next video will have the next part that will be DME arcs. Okay, this should have been fairly simple and easy to understand.